So, welcome to our next workshop for the Rights-Centric Education Quality Assurance System. We are recording this so that everybody will be able to catch up nice and easy. And I would like to actually start this meeting today, instead of diving straight into the reports and pledges and commitments, I'd actually like to start by handing over for a couple of minutes to Henning, who will introduce himself further, but he's got quite a few interesting things to share with us from his recent activities. So, Henning, over to you.
Hello, my name is Henning Graner. I'm from Germany. I've co-founded the Democratic School in 2008, and I'm also advocating for the rights of students within schools in general. And I've been together with Jana, Sifan, and Richard and Sylvie from France 2 years ago. We created a resolution and we adopted a resolution at the International Democratic Education Conference in Nepal. And this resolution was about clarifying compulsory education. You might know that in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also in the Convention of the Right on the Rights of the Child, there's some article which states that elementary education or primary education shall be made compulsory, and most states think of compulsory education as forcing children to go to school and think this is the right way to guarantee the right to education. And in fact, if you study the minutes of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as they were prepared, it's very clear that the authors of this article, they didn't think of forcing children to school. They were concerned about that the state and also the parents that they can't prevent children to have an education. This was the original meaning of this compulsory education, and we thought it's probably a good idea to publicize it and that everybody knows it. And back then, we didn't get an answer we filed it to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, and we didn't get an answer at that time. Now we have a chance to resubmit it. So that's a bit of the backstory. That's also, I think, the origins of the Rights-Centric Education Network somehow.
Yeah.
Sifan and Jana, they continued the work, I think. Maybe Richard also, I'm not sure. You
Mhm.
can say it for yourself, I'm not so sure, but I think this was a original initiative that's also started Right-Centric Education Network. Um, Recently, um, I came up with an idea that we should probably visit United Nations conferences. By chance, I heard about the Social Forum, which is a yearly gathering in Geneva from the United Nations Human Rights Council. And year after year, they meet and they invite people from civil society and organizations and also representatives of different states, and they discuss certain subjects which are somehow linked to human rights. And this year in 2025, it was the first time they talked about education, the right to education and human rights. What's the link between right to education and human rights? And when I saw the agenda, it was quite clear to me that there are many organizations who have many relevant causes to go there. but none of them were addressing the fact, in my view, it's a fact, that within schools, human rights are infringed upon. Most organizations were more, for example, concerned with what's the relation between the right of education and women's rights? What's the relation between poverty and the right to education? What can we do to prevent climate change or to do something about it? And the right to education. All important topics. But the idea that that human rights have to be protected within educational settings, I had the impression, looking at the agenda, no organization would talk about it. And my idea was there should be at least one person who goes there and voices this perspective. And in the end, there were four persons from different organizations. Gabriel from UDEC. I was identifying myself as a founding member of the Rights-Centric Education Network. And Pamela from Quest. And who else? And Katie from Ali. So four different persons were at the social forum, and we had the chance to talk, to voice our perspective. Um, there were general discussions where everybody in the audience could give a contribution, and we did it. And we talked with some people. And to my surprise, there was one employee from the United Nations Human Rights Council who was very much interested in what I had to say. And she came to me, handed me her card with her contact details, and said to me, "Could you please get in touch with me? We are very much interested in what you were saying, and we would like you maybe to contribute to an upcoming call for inputs." And they are preparing a report, and this report is, let me see, it's a call for inputs on curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment at the service of the right to education. And not only me, also Gabriel was approached by this woman, and I met her again at another conference. I went last Tuesday. I've been to another conference, UNESCO conference, and I met this woman again, and she recognized me, and we talked a little bit, and she made it very clear that she's really interested. She made the impression that not only are we dependent on the interests of her and of the United Nations, they are also dependent on us, on our contributions. So that was my impression. She's very much interested that we submit something. And I think we should do that. And my idea is that uh, that the Rights-Centric Education Network, that people who are organized or who are a member or founding member of the Rights-Centric Education Network, that they should submit something, and that we probably will have several submissions from different people from this network. Like we are not an organization who can compile something all together. We could do it, but I think it's a bit challenging because the deadline is 25th of January. But what we can do, we can submit each of us individually, or maybe a small group, maybe a school which is also a member of the Rights-Centric Education Network. We can prepare something, and we can share it before we submit it, so we can have a look at each other's submissions, so we can get inspired or we can help to improve it. And then there will be a number of submissions from the Right-Centric Education Network, I hope. And also, I want that other organizations are aware of this opportunity and also hopefully are deciding to submit something. UDEC is already aware of it and they are already I hope they haven't started yet, I think, but there are some people who said, yes, we want to do it. They want to submit something. And I would like also to see Aero in the United States and the Self-Directed Education Network, or what's it called? Alliance of Self-Directed
Yeah.
Education and some other organizations that they also submit something so that we have several submissions from different organizations which have one thing in common. They are interested in the protection of the right of children and young people within educational contexts. And might have a different angle. Each organization is good at a special area. For example, UDIC probably will talk a lot about democratic schools, but the Alliance of Self-Directed Education might talk about a broader approach. It's not only about schools. Um, and and we as a rights-centric education network, I imagine that I will write something which is quite linked to the documents of the United Nations, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the General Commands, so that they immediately see, okay, there's a connection between what we as United Nations have published and what they want to do. Yeah, that's the idea, and I don't know. That's probably all for now. I can show you if you want. I can show you the page of this call. I can give you the link of this call, whatever you want.
I think if you drop the link into the chat, and then
Okay.
also just to make everybody aware that, we do have a Discord group where we can share these things, discuss these things. Um, and yeah, Discord isn't a platform that everybody's on, but we're finding it increasingly useful. So just to strongly encourage anybody who wants to join it, with the upside being that most of the young people use Discord for gaming and things like that. So it's also a great way to connect to your teens. So Henning, if I could just ask you one other thing,
Yes.
um, from the uh, from what I've seen so far of the session that you attended most recently, it was about curriculum rights. And I wonder if you could say a few words about your impression of UNESCO's take on that in terms of the right to have a sufficient curriculum in order to support quality for education. What was your impression of their take on that at present? Thanks.
Yeah, the International Symposium of the UNESCO last Tuesday was called International Symposium on the Future of the Right to Education, Renewing Global Commitments and Charting Future Direction. And there were several panels and also the opportunity for the audience to interact with the people from the panel. And what you were referring right now, Jana, it was one person at the last panel, I think,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who who was a lawyer and who was looking at, or his talk was about the right to a curriculum. And I was a bit, I found it to be interesting. I had never heard this notion having a right to a curriculum. And um, if I have understood him correctly, his idea was let's not have just a curriculum. Let's define which parts of the curriculum are so essential that everybody feels it's probably good if people learn this, let's say reading and writing and basic mathematics. and let's define this as a right, that every person has a right to this kind of curriculum, and that everything else is up to pluralism. That in every country people are thinking differently about what children should learn, so there should be much room for different approaches. Um, I asked him what he thinks about what he thinks about mandatory curriculum. My talk was about the problems if you have a mandatory curriculum and what he thinks about it. And he, he said something like it's important that people can have the basics and that's the right of the people and but everything else should be and he wasn't so clear should be decided by whom. I had the impression it will still be the state, the nation state, who decides about the rest of the curriculum, and that was not so. I'm not so convinced about that. So I think he has not really considered the idea that nobody should enforce a curriculum on a child, even if the state or even if the town or the school has decided on this curriculum, even if there's pluralism and every town does it differently, every school in a district does it differently. If the school still enforces uh, this curriculum to on the child, that's not our idea. That's not what we think. And I don't think that he really has thought about this.
Hmm. Yeah, this has been my experience is even when I wrote my first article about human rights and education, I think it was back in 2017 or 18 now. It was my impression that most people just don't know and haven't thought it through. Because they've themselves grown up in a schooling situation where there was a mandatory curriculum. So that's just what reality is for education. Um, but I'm seeing more and more people starting to wake up from all over the place around the fact that, I mean, for example, there's just been a study that's come out where the conclusion is that academic excellence isn't excellent if it results in trauma, for example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm slowly working my way through the UNESCO report on homeschooling through a human rights lens. And it's very, very clear that the way they're seeing it is that parents are the drivers, for example, of homeschooling. So I think what we are working on here in the Rights-Centric Education Network is we are trying to fulfill the promise of the human rights documents that hasn't been understood as being possible. I think the visionaries who created, for example, the Declaration of Human Rights in the first place. I remember in the minutes and the discussions, it was even raised that it's the child's right, and the parent has to protect the child's right, um, but the parent must not be able to interfere with the child's right because the child must be able to enforce their right to education in their own right. And I think that then got lost sight of. And that's what we are trying to now fulfill, is that this is not about parents choosing a form of education, that also, as you said, the compulsory phrasing was never intended to force children to go to school. The parents' right to choose the form of education was also never intended to be the parents' right. It was meant to be the parent safeguarding the child's rights. So that's really what we're trying to do in this network. So I wanted to just give Henning a bit of time to catch us up on his adventures, also so that we can all get a slightly bigger picture around what it is that we're doing when we when we sign our pledge and we start submitting our reports. We are helping, apart from helping protect our own families from being able to draw a line between what we are doing and what they might be frightened we are doing. That's the first thing, because I think there's a huge concern over home education and micro schools and these things raising children in a way that is maybe in an echo chamber, that doesn't allow for critical thinking, that is just trying to create clones of the parent, or sort of more people for their particular religion or point of view. And I think they are worried about children being raised that, evolution doesn't exist, and that homosexuality is a sin, and they're worried about that. And I think that the first thing we can do with our submissions is we can personally differentiate ourselves and say, what we're doing might superficially look like what those people are doing. However, that's their business and their style. It's nothing to do with what we are doing. Here is what we are doing. We are centering the rights of the child, and we're doing so concretely. We're not just playing lip service. We're actually spelling out for you, this is how we meet the rights. You can reality check that this actually fits. We actually do allow our children to have a voice and a choice, and they are participants and they are partners in their education. We are not parents dictating to them. The second part of what we are doing, which is so beautiful, is we are giving that illustration to the world, because so many people cannot imagine what is possible. If you take a typical school classroom and you suddenly allow the children freedom to do, what they want with their time and effort, you are mostly going to get chaos, right? Because you can't instill a very, very tight control and then suddenly take it away and expect people to know what to do with that freedom. So it's very, very difficult for people who've only experienced that to imagine what happens when we truly empower children. And by posting quite a lot of detail in our reports, we actually start giving people that vision. Oh, when children's rights are truly respected and children become genuinely empowered, it can actually look like this. I'll just give you one very brief example from my own AHA. One of the facilitators on my courses, I invited her to share a session about what their family does with budgeting. I would never in a million years have imagined a family of people where the youngest person was sort of still well under 10, sitting down together with the monthly income in total and collaboratively deciding how to assign it. And I find that still that's quite a challenging idea. But until you've seen a family talk about that and say, we do this and it works like this and this is how we do it, it's very, very hard to imagine how far there is to go. So all of these examples from democratic schools and unschooling families and Sudbury schools and all of these places, when we put up these reports, we're actually helping for people to have that aha. Right. Now, I think I've probably talked enough. What I'd like to do is, last time we suggested that people have a go at starting, even if it's just in a little simple way, have a go at writing your first submission, just as dipping your toes in the water, and then we can workshop them, we can support you to get them to a place where you want to submit them either publicly, which is ideal, or else so that you have them privately in case you then have a need to show them to somebody at some point for a strategic purpose. So I'd like to check. We don't have all the same people every time at the workshops. So if you would like to discuss your input in some way, either on or off the recording, could you drop for me into the chat that you have the beginnings of a submission that you need to ask questions about, or that you want to discuss? So if you can just pop into the chat, yes, and if you can just say in a breakout room or in the main room, then we'll just have a bit of an idea of how to spend the next half hour, because if people aren't bringing that here today, then I'll talk us through a few ideas for how to take that step if you haven't yet or you're still struggling to. So I'm just going to give it one moment if anybody wants to drop in the chat that they want to workshop their own submission now. Now's your chance to put that in the chat. Okay, I think I'm seeing that people would prefer to be walked through sort of more high-level examples. Um, and or I'm very used to doing things democratically and by participation. I can walk us through some high-level ideas of templates that we're developing. Or is there something else that would make sense to spend the time in this call that somebody wants to propose?
Uh, just for a little input on how we structured the templates, I think we should, as much as possible, have um, like case studies kind of things on separate areas rather than like trying to have one big submission. So, for example, well, a couple of reasons for that. One is that um, if we have everything we do at home, everything we do in a school as like one big snapshot, then and we tag that this is about right to be heard, freedom from violence, freedom of association, all sorts of things. It's kind of hard for somebody to be able to find, I want case studies on freedom of association because that's the area I'm interested in. Um, so it makes it easier for people to find things if they are in smaller kind of chunks. And I think it also makes it easier for people to submit things if you can work on an area and you submit it. And then when you get some time in a few weeks' time, you again work on something and you submit it, and you don't have to kind of be worried about have I done put everything in this document, and that can be sort of a pressure. So with the way the international reporting works, of course, because countries are expected to have people that they pay to write these reports, then you get it all done and it's taken up for reviews. It needs to be submitted by a particular date. But for us, I think we can take it in little chunks. And if we are going to take an example, then maybe uh, use like how school discipline is managed without corporal punishment or maybe without any punishment might be an area we have to take up as like a because it's kind of one area that's compact and then it links to a few rights and we can talk about how that could be done or we could maybe take up another one but I'm just thinking that something like children how does children's participatory rights work versus having a fixed curriculum is kind of a bigger thing and it might not be so easy to work on. But at the same time, if that's something that people are more interested in doing, then that's maybe something we could workshop on as well.
Okay, so what I'm hearing when you say all of this sounds quite exciting to me because how I'm imagining now is that we could put up as much of a chunk of a report as we want to, as we're ready to, as we can manage, but then maybe we also keep the community connection going by having a this month, let's all focus on this, next month, let's all focus on that, that we could actually keep adding whenever people wanted to add. And of course, people could do that in their own time as well. But we could also use it as a sort of a community process for those who wanted to have that sense of, joining a kind of an ongoing, growing structure could also be an idea. Um, if you're listening to all of this on the recording, please remember that you can absolutely interact and say, yeah, I liked that, or I'd be interested in that kind of thing. The Discord server can be used, and then also always the email address at network@rights-centric.education. Have I got it right this time, Sifan? Yeah, okay. All right. I just want to quickly check here. All right, so Graham has sort of looked at a kind of a narrative way to document things that he's willing to share that we can have a bit of a look at and chat about. Is everybody okay if we hand over to Graham for a few minutes? Right, Graham, it's all yours.
Thanks, Shana, and thanks, Stefan. Yeah, when I saw the request for a report, I wasn't really obviously clear what was required. So I just thought it would be a nice opportunity really to do some descriptive writing, kind of like a blog post
Mm-hmm.
around the experiences of learning to read and some math skills while playing games. So I don't know if that would be kind of what you would be looking for. So it is more prose rather than a report. I would kind of classify it. And not necessarily naming specific children at all. It was like a general experience at the self-directed education center. So I don't know if that's kind of the direction that we should be heading in.
Mm-hmm. So I think, correct me anybody, but my understanding is that we want to have a fair bit of latitude about how people do their reports, so
Mm-hmm.
that we have a variety of approaches and ways of seeing it and richness. Also, because people read, um, we have different readers. Some people only really learn from stories and concrete examples. Other people learn better from kind of more abstract technical descriptions and summaries. So having a variety is wonderful. So in terms of naming specific children, when you're reporting for your micro school,
Mm.
then I don't even want to call it micro school. I'm trying to use new terminology so that we differentiate from your human scale education setting. If anyone can
Okay,
come
sounds
up with
good.
something more contracted that isn't micro school, because it's not a micro school, is it really? Um, then yeah, it's
Yeah,
absolutely appropriate not to name the individual children. You want to
okay.
rather leave that to those families to decide. But describing the process and how things happen, I think, is great. And then we are busy trialing and playing with different AI prompts that and I don't know if you've seen those. I'll make sure that I send you a copy of where the current one is in its stage of development, and then you paste what you've written there into that AI prompt, and then ideally it's also going to spit you out like Article 12, Article 14, right? That you can also then list at the bottom of your report, like this is an example of how we respect the right to participate and the right to seek information and the right to self-expression, that sort of little explanation comes along with your qualitative document.
Okay, so to reference the narrative with the child's rights and
Yeah,
yeah, so to make the correlation between the kind of broad description and the technical kind of report kind of side of things. Sure,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Because I mean,
that's
yeah. So again, you'll have places where they feel like they're 100% fulfilling the right to participate because they allow the kids to vote on the uniform.
mm,
And they can't envision,
uniform.
you know, that the kids could actually be doing a heck of a lot more than that. And then when you've got that article and it's searchable in our database, that is like, well, let's go and have a look at, all the different ways that people are fulfilling this article. And then they see what you're doing and they go, oh my golly gums, right? We've got so much more adventure we can go on. Right.
Okay,
Lovely.
all right.
Thank you.
Just
I
want
look
to
forward to seeing it. Hey? That'd be great.
Yes.
yeah, just want to
Yeah,
add
maybe.
something on onto that. I think um, the most powerful part of this is actually if it's written in um, plain language in a way like just how we would describe it if you're talking to another parent or teacher or child, like in that language, because I think this what we're trying to do becomes really powerful if so the children in your setting can themselves read what's happening in another setting. So they don't have to depend on adults to filter this, or like somebody with a kind of legal background who can differentiate freedom of expression from the right to be heard or something like that. But they can see, oh, well, this is what's happening in Sipan setting in Sri Lanka, or this is what Carmen is doing in South Africa, and we want that too. So when children themselves are able to access it and be defenders of their own rights, that's when it becomes really powerful. Because if you look at like the country reports that countries submit, those are not designed to be accessible to children, and it's like just uh, not friendly. And so I think as much as possible, we should have our descriptions in terms of what we do, how is the response to that sort of thing in like general language. And then we may have a little annotation or reference that this is relating to such and such right because it is doing what article this in the general comment on this talks about. So somebody who wants to correlate that, because when we want to engage with the human rights discourse, and when we want to engage with like researchers or this call for inputs by the special rapporteur on the right to education, then we do have to reference it in terms of some of those formal concepts, which are the legally protected ones. But that can be, like I mentioned, with some sort of annotation or link, but the content itself is ideally in like blog kind of language, like what you seem to already have.
Yeah. And of course, that also makes it easier for the children in your family or your setting to check what it is that you're reporting on and that they agree with it. And if they have things to add, that it's then, accessible from that perspective too.
Yeah, thanks. That definitely does help. And yeah, so if you could share that AI assist and yeah, I'll try. Yeah, just wondering, and audio visual, like if they were to like do a vlog, the children themselves about what they've experienced, could that kind of be stored on a platform that could be accessible? Or is that could
Or a
that be
link
a
to
like
it.
report or a link to
Well,
it? Okay, yes.
I mean, we can figure out a way to accept videos and things like that, but from privacy and consent to be their perspective, there is going to be questions. So
Okay.
one of the things we've had is that if you're going to have photos or videos, then you should get the consent of those people. And I think, for example, okay, like with our son, we can have a conversation because this is something we have had some conversations about, like, can this be posted, can this be published? And he's able to say no, but whether when he says yes, is he like fully aware of the consequences of this? And I'm not entirely sure, like, how some of this content may be been used to make deep fakes in AI and things like that. So there is a certain amount of care that needs to come in, especially if children are going to be in the videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
My personal preference is usually to actually film and photograph things so that you can see what children are doing and hear what they are saying, but not necessarily have their faces in is not actually always as important as one might think. I know it makes better marketing, to have full face, happy children. But my experience has also been that as children get older, they sometimes change their minds about what they want visible.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So in addition to the AI prompts, and please, if you happen to use the AI prompts or come up with your own AI prompt experiments, please bring the knowledge back. So if you tried the AI prompt and it took you sideways and you refined it and then you had to ask clarifying questions, please bring all that knowledge back so we can keep refining it all as much as possible. The other thing that I'm going to be sending out, all of these things are optional. If you find them useful, experiment with them. I'm going to be sending out a kind of a little checklist based on the optimizing conditions for self-directed education, because these have been defined largely through the work of Peter Gray and then the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, and then myself taking it through my own process of refinement. But there's 8 optimizing conditions for self-directed education. And I find they make quite a nice checklist in terms of, we might not think about all of the things that we are doing to fulfill young people's rights in our interactions. We might just think of this one and that one and not realize the importance of that one. So with that checklist going through, for example, do they have access to the tools of the culture to play with? Do they have access to a variety of adults who are helpers and not judges? It can also be a way to structure our initial writing if we're not, for example, using, like I imagine you used there, Graham, just sort of free form observation. You might also then take the optimizing conditions and then go, yeah, I didn't write this from my observation, but now that I see this prompt, I realize we also do this. So we want to come up with a few different things like this that can support people as much as possible to be able to think through, what do I want to write about? What should I mention? And then again, it can go through the AI process to map it onto the various articles and general comments. And there, I think we're also starting to create a bit of a list of articles and general comments that and summaries. I know Beth has made some suggestions of summaries, and we're going to be adding to that also so that people can read some of the summaries of articles and general comments, and the kids can, for that right to learn about human rights and learn about their rights. Okay, we have a bit more than 10 minutes. Are there questions or thoughts or other things that people want to raise? I want to make sure that these times that we spend together are as useful as possible for those of you who make the effort. Thank you for making the effort to come.
I'm not sure, was Graham going to share some of what he had written in a sort of blog format, or we was just going to
Yeah, I don't have it right with me at this moment. I mean, basically, it was there's just like 2 pieces of writing. There's one about our family kind of journey with learning to read with our son. And then the other one was a short piece about playing board games, maths board games. Is that board game Prime? Um, and just how it just contrasts the myself as a facilitator kind of fixed in my mathematical way of doing math, and just observing the children being much more flexible and fluid in how they approached it and solved the problems. So, so yeah, I think it was just descriptive, but I was just wondering how it would work as a report. And now I've got more clarity around how to tailor that to look more like what's required for this. And yeah, so it'll be work in progress. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a
So
fun project. I love it.
yeah,
And it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's like when you really observe and document, it's actually beautiful to see how it's adding up and how many beautiful ways it expresses. We
Mm,
realize how much we miss when we're not watching. But
mm,
I want to just also add, forgive me, internationals, but this might also be relevant in your own countries. From my experience with my own province's home education task team within the official government Department of Education. One of their concerns is sort of being able to see evidence that learning is going on and being supported. They put it in the terms of seeing that teaching and learning is happening. But I think what they really mean is they want to see that the children are engaged in meaningful learning that's being appropriately supported by adults. And I think that this kind of observation makes a very nice alternative to the usual thing that they expect, which would be portfolios of written work that children have done and that have been stuck in a book and handed to them to peruse. That we are, as much as possible, saying we're not going to impose that on our kids, but rather, we can have the adults describe to you what we're providing and some of the ways that the children are making use of it. That again, it reminds me of something I said to one family that came to investigate Riverstone Village at one point. And the young man who was being very homeschooled looked at our books, and we had some sort of books on the Sudbury model, and he was like, "Are those the textbooks that I'll have to read?" And I said, "No, actually, what we do is we make the adults do a whole lot of studying and homework and reading a lot of books so the children don't have to unless they feel like it." Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have something they want to ask or bring?
I'd like
Um,
to ask something if
yes,
possible.
please do.
Hi, everybody. I I'm thinking about the lack of evidence for those of us who are homeschooling or unschooling families. The fact that
Mm.
without a I can't remember what the alternative term you used for micro school was, but without that kind of space where at least you have multiple kids and multiple adults involved who provide a kind of check and balance. As an unschooling family, you kind of limited to your immediate family and the number of adults around you who are actually supportive, which some of us don't have that many supportive
Yes.
or people who fully understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a matter of self-reporting, and there's little evidence to kind of support what you may say about what your family's doing.
Yeah.
I'm interested in
Yes.
your perspective on how that, I mean, I imagine in a few years' time, my kids might look at what we posted, but for now, they're not really that concerned. They're quite young. They're not really concerned about, or they don't challenge me too much if I discuss what the reasons we chose this. But
Yeah.
perhaps in the future, they might be able to look at a report of what we did and say, actually, I don't know if we really did that, or I didn't like the way you did this, or.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, and I think you've already highlighted the one thing is that as they get older, they will be able to do that. And that is also part of our thinking. Um, in the meantime, I think this is where I know for South Africa, I'm quite committed to doing two things. The first is making resources available, because in my experience, there's, you know, the stereotype of this neglectful parent who doesn't care. I don't really encounter that personally. I do encounter parents who don't really know what to do and don't really know how to go about it, especially when they end up what I call DFE, which is de facto excluded. They didn't plan on unschooling. It's just that they find that nothing else is working for their child, and then they're sort of starting from square one. So the first thing is to make resources available. And for example, as I said, those optimizing conditions, if you take those optimizing conditions for self-directed education and you consider how am I meeting each of these, and you can start ticking those boxes and thinking that through, then you're going to pretty much guarantee that you are providing something very substantial for your children and significantly, supportive. But then also online interaction is something that we want to build, so that firstly, there's a support network for parents to be able to connect in spite of their remote locations and sort of geographical scatter, for that mutual support and also mentoring and troubleshooting, but then also for the children to increasingly be able to connect online as they get older. We experimented, for example, with a Minecraft server for a short time earlier this year, right? Which also then becomes an extra safeguarding layer, because sometimes if
Yes,
children
because they have
aren't,
access to another adult that they can report to if there's like abuse going on. Because this is the
yeah,
other thing, is that abusers will tend to completely isolate their children so that they
yes,
can't,
exactly.
suppose.
And the fact that the parent is going to come into an interactive space and allow their children to enter into an interactive space already suggests to you that, this is
This is not
probably
that
a
kind of,
parent less
yeah, setting.
needing of
Yes.
helicoptering by the department. But the other thing is that, sometimes children won't approach an adult at all, whereas they will confide in other children. And
Yes.
what we've learned is that the children who have been well supported in kind of communication-based education and parenting they don't think they put it this way, they're much better at discerning when they'll be considered a snitch and when something is private, or when something actually needs to call in somebody
Yes.
for help or disclosure.
Yes.
And that's where we really want to make those kinds of social, emotional resources available, that over time that whole network can grow into something very supportive for everybody. Yeah. So yes, please get engaged, because there's only so much that any one person can achieve. And at this point, we really want to keep this whole thing free and volunteer based. So the more that you find you resonating with, oh yeah, that's really a need, then please consider, even if it's an hour a month, it all adds up. Great. Thank you. We are in the last few minutes of the call for today, and we are trying to keep these nice and tight and on time to encourage people to come and not feel like it's going to spill over too far. Is there any last thing that somebody would like to raise for today before we start wrapping up? Okay. Then I think what we're going to do is again encourage those of you who are willing to join the Discord server, because also from what we've just said right now, one of the things I love about Discord is that it's very, very easy within one server to actually create private spaces, separate spaces, that are only visible to the people who are, involved in those particular spaces. So it really allows us to support a number of different sub-communities, and of course have the children and the parents and the staff and everybody in one place as well upon a Discord server for beautiful communication. Right. Closing words.
Just want to add something to what Nicole was asking about. To sort of wanted to link it back to something you said at the start, because I think anybody outside of the mainstream, whether it's called an alternative school or whether it's unschooling or homeschooling, is always going to be under scrutiny from family members, from people in the village or the town, as well as education authorities. And this is important in some ways, because as a society, I think we want to prevent situations where children are facing very abusive or neglectful environments, and this is being covered up under the name of homeschooling or something like that. There was this incident, I think, early this year, where a child had been under sort of house arrest until he was an adult and had set the house on fire to escape. And so if and we hope that to the cultivation system, we're actually going to be attracting people who are doing some sort of alternative provision because they are concerned about the well-being of the children and are actively doing things. And then when you have things documented on the quality assurance system saying this is how I support my child's right to play, this is how I support my child's right to be heard, etc., etc., it's much harder for people to come and then accuse you of being a neglectful parent or an abusive parent because you have things that you have documented. And I mean, there could be somebody who's doing some elaborate bluffing act and who's like, writing a lot of fake things when nothing like that is happening. But then that, in a case where child protection service or somebody said that's something sort of verifiable. And if anybody is doing this genuinely, having those reports, especially if they've been compiled over a long period, can help prove that you are doing this in a way that is respectful to your rights.
Yeah.
So even if the children are too young to understand it now, and at a later stage they might also say, well, you could have done it better this way, but at that time you were doing the best you could. That or something even better.
Yeah. And also, if you have a child who learns differently, it can be a wonderful record to have if they say, for example, well, your child isn't reading at 8.5, now they have to go to mainstream school, for you to be able to actually show, well, we've been reading aloud and doing this and that and the other for several years. It's not that, we just were neglectful, because everybody has different times of unfolding. Right. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Sifan, do we have a next date selected from the doodle yet?
So not yet, because I saw that there were some people who had said like no to all the options, and then I wrote people asking whether they had any other times that they would like. But I didn't get enough responses for other times to set up another doodle. So I think for now it looked like next Friday, this sort of same time slot was the best for most people. But I think what I'll do is give it a couple of days, and by Sunday or Monday, along with the recording of this, I'll check the doodle. So anybody who needs to update or change the doodle settings can do that. Is also, I think, like we initially sent it out about a couple of weeks back, and at that time, people's visibility may have also been different. But yeah, so tentatively next Friday, but I'll take a look at the doodle and confirm that within the next couple of days.
Okay. Well, I will be here next Friday at the same time, and then we might have an additional one as well. So please do fill in the doodle if next Friday doesn't suit you, and feel free to email your draft to a network at rightcentric.education in the meantime. If you don't have access to the Discord yourself, we'll load it up there for you so people can give you some feedback and pointers, and then we'll get back to you on the feedback and pointers, and look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks, everybody, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.